marble floors of Rothtek's 42nd floor lobby felt cold against 7-year-old Lily Roth's legs as she sat cross-legged, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Corporate executives in tailored suits stepped carefully around her, their conversations never pausing, their eyes never meeting hers. From across the expansive lobby, Ethan Walsh approached quietly, his custodial uniform a stark contrast to the polished business attire surrounding them. He knelt beside Lily without a word, pulling a small bottle of bubble solution from his pocket. As delicate spheres began floating through the air, catching the afternoon light like tiny rainbows, the child's breathing slowly steadied. High above on the executive floor, CEO Vivienne Roth stood frozen at her corner office window, watching a janitor accomplish what she never could, reaching her daughter's heart with simple, unconditional kindness. Vivienne pressed her palm against the floor-to-ceiling glass, her breath fogging the pristine surface as she watched the scene unfold 30 floors below. The distance felt infinite, not just the physical space between her corner office and the lobby, but the emotional chasm she'd unknowingly created between herself and her daughter. She remembered being Lily's age, sitting alone in similar corporate lobbies while her parents attended endless meetings, feeling invisible among the rushing adults in their expensive clothes. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd built this empire to give Lily everything she'd never had, yet somehow she'd recreated the exact isolation she'd sworn to prevent. Ethan didn't just blow bubbles. He settled onto the cold marble floor beside Lily, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He spoke in quiet tones that Vivienne couldn't hear from her elevated perch, but she could see the effect the way Lily's rigid shoulders began to relax, how her tear-streaked face turned toward him with cautious curiosity. The janitor pulled something from his cart, a small coloring book and crayons, and spread them on the floor between them. Vivienne watched as her daughter actually smiled for the first time in weeks. When was the last time she had made Lily smile like that? The question hit her like a physical blow. The bustling executives continued their choreographed dance around the pair on the floor, their expensive shoes clicking against marble as they navigated around this small island of calm. Some glanced down with mild irritation at the obstruction to their efficient paths, others with fleeting curiosity, but none stopped. This was the world Vivienne had created, a place where productivity and profit took precedence over everything else, where a child's tears were an inconvenience to be stepped around rather than a soul to be comforted. Ethan seemed oblivious to the corporate ballet around him. His entire focus remained on Lily, and Vivienne found herself studying his patient movements, the way he listened when Lily spoke, how he nodded seriously at whatever she was telling him. There was something almost sacred about the scene, this gentleman in his simple uniform, treating her daughter with a reverence that all of Vivienne's wealth and power had never been able to provide. She realized with startling clarity that in building walls to protect Lily from the world, she'd also built walls between them. The afternoon sun slanted through the lobby's massive windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Vivienne watched as Ethan helped Lily to her feet, steadying her with a gentle hand on her shoulder before gathering up the coloring supplies. Her daughter looked up at him with something that made Vivienne's chest tighten, pure trust, the kind she used to see in Lily's eyes when she looked at her mother. When had that changed? When had Vivienne become just another adult in an expensive suit, too busy to see that her child was drowning in plain sight? As Ethan walked Lily toward the elevator bank, Vivienne saw him point upward, undoubtedly explaining that her mother would be down soon. Lily nodded, but there was no excitement in her posture, no anticipation of their reunion. Instead, there was resignation, the weary acceptance of a 7-year-old who'd learned not to expect too much from the adults in her life. The realization cut deeper than any boardroom defeat Vivienne had ever experienced. She'd spent years climbing to the top of this glass tower, but somewhere along the way, she'd left the most important person in her life far below. Lily's days had become a carefully orchestrated symphony of expectations, each note precisely timed and perfectly executed, and utterly exhausting for a 7-year-old soul. Her mornings began at 6:30 with Mandarin lessons via video call with Mrs. Chen, followed by a breakfast of organic steel-cut oats that she barely touched while reviewing vocabulary flashcards. The ride to Brightwood Academy was spent listening to classical music that was supposed to enhance cognitive development, according to the latest article Vivienne had forwarded to their driver. By 7:45, Lily was deposited at the steps of the most prestigious private school in Manhattan, her small backpack heavy with the weight of expectation. The academy prided itself on creating future leaders, but for Lily, it felt more like a beautiful prison. Her days were packed with accelerated mathematics, creative writing workshops, and science labs that would challenge most middle schoolers. After regular classes came violin lessons with Maestro Rodriguez, who insisted on perfection in every bowstroke, followed by French conversation with Mademoiselle Laurent, who corrected Lily's pronunciation with the dedication of a drill sergeant. Tennis lessons, coding club, and academic chess rounded out her schedule, leaving no room for the simple pleasure of being a child. But it was the waiting that broke her spirit. Every afternoon, Lily found herself in the Rothtech lobby, perched on the edge of an oversized leather chair, watching the elevator numbers light up and hoping this would be the time her mother would emerge. The executives who swept past her existed in a different world, one of urgent phone calls, clicking heels, and conversations filled with words like synergy and optimization. They moved with purpose and power, while Lily sat small and still, trying to make herself invisible so as not to disappoint anyone with her presence. The panic attacks had started 3 months ago, beginning as a flutter in her chest during a particularly difficult violin recital. Mrs. Ence Harrison, her private tutor, had dismissed it as performance anxiety, suggesting more practice time. But the flutter had grown into a crushing weight that settled on Lily's chest at random moments during Mandarin lessons when she couldn't remember the tones, in the back seat of the car when the classical music felt too loud, and especially here in the lobby surrounded by the corporate energy that seemed to electrify everyone except her. Vivienne had noticed, of course. How could she not when her daughter's teacher called to report that Lily had locked herself in the bathroom during science class? But Vivienne's solutions came from the same playbook that had built her empire. Identify the problem, allocate resources, optimize outcomes, more tutoring to reduce academic stress. A child psychologist, Dr. Martinez, who came highly recommended and charged $300 per session. A new bedroom designed by a color therapist who specialized in creating calming environments. Everything except the one thing Lily needed most, her mother's undivided attention. Dr. Martinez had explained that children of high-achieving parents often internalized pressure in unexpected ways. She'd used terms like perfectionist anxiety and achievement stress disorder, words that made Vivienne feel like she was failing at the most important job she'd ever had. But even the therapy sessions became another appointment in Lily's schedule, another task to be completed and optimized. The irony was devastating in trying to give Lily every advantage. Vivienne had created a childhood that felt more like a corporate training program than a time for wonder and discovery. Ethan had noticed the changes in Lily's demeanor during his evening cleaning rounds. He'd seen her go from a curious child who would wave shyly from her chair to a withdrawn little girl who sat with her shoulders hunched, her breathing shallow and rapid. His professional instincts, dormant but never truly gone, recognized the signs immediately. This wasn't just a child who was tired or overwhelmed. This was a little soul in genuine distress, and every fiber of his being ached to help her. Ethan Walsh had once been Dr. Ethan Walsh, a man whose business cards read licensed clinical psychologist, specializing in childhood anxiety and trauma. His office at the Children's Behavioral Health Center on East 73rd Street had been a sanctuary painted in warm blues and greens, filled with soft cushions, art supplies, and carefully chosen toys that helped young clients express emotions they didn't yet have words for. He'd spent 15 years of his career helping children navigate the complex landscape of their inner worlds, developing a reputation for his gentle approach and remarkable success rate with severe anxiety cases. The transformation from Dr. Walsh to Ethan the janitor hadn't happened overnight. It had been a slow erosion, like watching a sandcastle dissolve with each incoming wave. When Sarah, his wife of 12 years, was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, their world shifted on its axis. The medical bills mounted despite their insurance. Experimental treatments required travel to specialized clinics, and the demands of caregiving meant that Ethan could no longer maintain his full patient load. He'd reduced his practice, then suspended it entirely, pouring all of his energy into fighting a battle they would ultimately lose. Sarah's death had left him with two profound losses: the love of his life and the career that had defined him. Without the continuing education credits required to maintain his license, and with mounting debt from Sarah's treatment, Ethan found himself starting over at 36 with an 8-year-old son who was drowning in his own grief. Jack had stopped speaking for 3 months after his mother's funeral, communicating only through drawings that grew darker and more chaotic with each passing week. It was during those long, silent evenings that Ethan discovered the healing power of simple presence, sitting beside his son without trying to fix anything, just being there in the darkness together. The job at Rothtech had been a necessity, not a choice. Night cleaning paid well enough to cover their modest apartment in Queens and Jack's expenses, and the hours allowed Ethan to be home when Jack returned from school. He'd expected to feel bitter about the dramatic shift in his circumstances, pushing a cart through the halls of corporate power when he'd once sat across from senators' children in his private practice. Instead, he found unexpected peace in the rhythmic nature of his work, the methodical way he moved through each floor, the quiet satisfaction of leaving spaces cleaner than he'd found them. But it was impossible for Ethan to completely shut off the part of himself that had spent years studying the intricate patterns of childhood distress. When he first noticed Lily sitting alone in the lobby, his trained eye immediately cataloged the signs. The way she held herself so still it was almost unnatural, the rapid, shallow breathing, the hypervigilance that kept her scanning the room for threats that existed only in her anxious mind. She reminded him of so many children he'd worked with, bright, sensitive souls who internalized the pressure around them until it became a weight too heavy for their small shoulders to bear. The decision to help hadn't been conscious or calculated. It had been as natural as breathing. When he saw Lily having her first panic attack in the lobby, her small body rigid with terror as the world crashed around her, every instinct he'd developed over 15 years of practice kicked in. The bubble solution had been Jack's, left in his cart from their afternoon together. But the technique was pure professional instinct, creating a focal point, encouraging deep breathing through gentle play, offering comfort without overwhelming a frightened child. Vivienne Roth had built her empire on the premise that success was the ultimate form of protection. If she could make enough money, wield enough influence, and climb high enough in the corporate hierarchy, she could shield her daughter from every possible harm. It was a philosophy born from her own childhood experiences, growing up as the daughter of two investment bankers who viewed parenting as another portfolio to manage. Her parents had provided every material advantage while remaining emotionally unavailable, and Vivienne had sworn to be different while somehow repeating the exact same patterns. The divorce from David Roth 3 years earlier had only intensified her drive to succeed. She'd thrown herself into building Rothtech with the fury of a woman who had something to prove, not just to the tech world that questioned every decision made by a female CEO, but to herself. Each successful product launch, every percentage point of market share gained, and every glowing profile in business magazines felt like armor she was building around Lily's future. If she could just work hard enough, smart enough, and ruthlessly enough, she could create a world where her daughter would never feel vulnerable or powerless. But success in the corporate world required sacrifices that Vivienne had convinced herself were temporary. Late nights became the norm as she navigated hostile takeover attempts and competitive product launches. Weekend business trips to Silicon Valley and overseas markets stretched into full weeks. Board meetings, investor calls, and strategic planning sessions filled every available hour, leaving precious little time for bedtime stories or playground visits. She'd hired the best nannies, enrolled Lily in the finest schools, and surrounded her with educational opportunities that most children could only dream of, all while missing the simple truth that what Lily needed most was her mother's presence. The corner office on the 42nd floor had become both her kingdom and her prison. From behind the mahogany desk that had cost more than most people's cars, Vivienne commanded a tech empire worth over $2 billion. She could make decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of users worldwide. Politicians sought her opinion, competitors studied her strategies, and business schools taught case studies based on her unconventional rise to power. Yet none of that influence seemed to matter when it came to the one relationship that should have been the most natural in the world. Watching Ethan comfort, Lily had shattered something inside Vivienne that she'd spent years carefully constructing. The ease with which he'd connected with her daughter, the immediate trust Lily had shown him, highlighted everything that was missing from their own relationship. When had she last sat on the floor with Lily? When had she last really listened to her daughter's concerns without simultaneously checking email or mentally rehearsing talking points for the next meeting? The questions multiplied like a virus in her mind, each one revealing another way she'd failed the person who mattered most. The realization that she'd become exactly like her own parents felt like a physical blow. She'd spent her entire adult life defining herself in opposition to Robert and Patricia Chen Roth, two brilliant, successful, and utterly cold individuals who had treated their daughter more like a reflection of their own achievements than a person worthy of unconditional love. Yet here she was, 35 years old and at the pinnacle of professional success, watching a janitor provide her daughter with the emotional support that should have been her responsibility. The irony was that Lily had never asked for private tutors or exclusive schools or a bedroom that looked like it belonged in an interior design magazine. She'd asked for simple things: for mommy to read her a story at bedtime, for someone to listen when she talked about her day, for permission to just be a 7-year-old without the weight of extraordinary expectations pressing down on her small shoulders. These were requests that couldn't be outsourced to staff or solved with increased budgets, and their simplicity had somehow made them the hardest for Vivian to fulfill. The afternoon when Ethan first brought Jack to the office, Lily was in her usual spot in the lobby, coloring half-heartedly in a workbook while waiting for her mother's meeting to end. She'd grown accustomed to the rhythm of corporate life, the urgent conversations that swept past her, the clicking of heels against marble, the electronic chimes of elevators arriving and departing. It was a lonely soundtrack, but familiar, and familiarity offered its own form of comfort to a child who'd learned to expect solitude. Jack Walsh appeared like a gentle disruption to her carefully ordered world. At 8 years old, he possessed the kind of quiet maturity that comes from experiencing loss too young, but his eyes still held the curiosity and kindness that tragedy hadn't been able to steal. He'd been to the office before with his father, but always stayed close to Ethan's side, observing the corporate environment with the wariness of a child who understood he didn't quite belong in this polished world. Today, however, something was different. Maybe it was the way Lily sat so perfectly still, like a small statue among the bustling adults. Or maybe it was the recognition of another child who knew what it felt like to be alone in a room full of people. "My dad says you come here every day," Jack said, settling cross-legged on the floor beside Lily's chair with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to making friends wherever he went. He pulled a battered tablet from his backpack, its screen protected by a case covered in stickers from various museums and science centers. "Want to see something cool? I found this game where you build bridges, but they have to be strong enough for trucks to drive across. It's like engineering, but fun." For Lily, who'd spent most of her social time with adults or in structured activities with classmates she barely knew, Jack's easy friendship felt like discovering a secret room in a house she'd lived in her whole life. She'd been taught to be polite to strangers, to speak when spoken to, and to always remember that she was representing not just herself but the Roth family name. But Jack didn't seem to care about any of that. He was simply a boy with a tablet and a genuine interest in sharing something he enjoyed, asking nothing more from her than her authentic attention. The bridge-building game became their first shared language. Jack explained the physics concepts in terms that made sense to a 7-year-old, while Lily's systematic approach to problem-solving impressed him in ways that made her feel genuinely valued for who she was, not what she achieved. They worked together to design increasingly complex structures, celebrating successful crossings and laughing at spectacular collapses. For the first time in months, Lily's laughter echoed through the Rothtech lobby, spontaneous, joyful, and utterly free of performance or pretense. Ethan watched from a discreet distance as he went about his cleaning duties, his heart lifting at the sight of 2 children finding connection in the sterile corporate environment. He recognized something profound happening, not just friendship, but mutual healing. Jack had been carrying the weight of his mother's death for over a year, and while he'd made remarkable progress, there were still moments when grief would settle over him like a heavy blanket. But in explaining things to Lily, in being the older child who could offer guidance and companionship, Jack was rediscovering parts of himself that had been dormant since Sarah's death. For Lily, Jack represented everything her structured world had been missing: spontaneity, genuine curiosity, and the simple pleasure of being understood by someone her own age. He didn't care about her violin performances or her Mandarin vocabulary. He wasn't impressed by her mother's corporate success or intimidated by the expensive clothes and accessories that marked her as different from most children. To Jack, she was simply Lily, a smart, funny girl who was really good at engineering games and who seemed to need a friend as much as he did. Their afternoon sessions became a ritual that both children looked forward to with an intensity that surprised their respective parents. Jack would arrive with his father, settling immediately beside Lily's chair to share whatever new discovery had captured his imagination that day. Sometimes it was origami patterns he'd learned from a library book, folded carefully from paper napkins begged from the lobby coffee station. Other times it was riddles and brain teasers, or collaborative storytelling where they took turns adding sentences to increasingly elaborate adventures. The games were simple, requiring nothing more than imagination and mutual interest, but they filled a need in both children that no amount of structured activities had been able to address. Vivienne found herself adjusting her schedule to witness these interactions, leaving meetings a few minutes early to observe from the elevator bank as her daughter experienced something she'd forgotten. Children were capable of pure, uncomplicated joy. The sight of Lily's face lighting up when Jack arrived, the way she saved interesting facts and stories to share with him, the comfortable silences they could share while working on tablet puzzles, all of it revealed aspects of her daughter's personality that had been hidden beneath layers of anxiety and expectation. This was who Lily was when she felt safe to simply be herself, and the realization both thrilled and devastated Vivienne in equal measure. The investigation into Ethan's background had begun innocently enough, a simple curiosity about the man who'd shown such kindness to her daughter. Vivienne had asked her assistant, Marcus, to run a standard background check, expecting to find exactly what she saw: a reliable employee with a clean record and no red flags. What she discovered instead read like a cosmic joke played by an indifferent universe, each revelation more stunning than the last. Dr. Ethan Michael Walsh, licensed clinical psychologist, New York State license. Number 47892. Doctorate in child psychology from New York University, graduated summa cum laude. 15 years of clinical experience at Children's Behavioral Health Center, specializing in anxiety disorders, childhood trauma, and family therapy. Published researcher with dozens of articles in peer-reviewed journals. Former consultant to the Department of Education on implementing mental health programs in public schools. The credentials were impressive enough to make most corporate executives envious, let alone a janitor pushing a cart through their halls. But it was the employment records that made Vivienne's blood run cold. 2 years earlier, almost to the day, Dr. Ethan Walsh had submitted a meticulously crafted application for the position of senior child psychologist at RothTech, a role that Vivienne herself had approved creating as part of their comprehensive employee wellness program. His cover letter had been thoughtful and specific, demonstrating clear knowledge of RothTech's corporate culture and expressing genuine enthusiasm for developing innovative mental health resources for employees' families. His resume was flawless, his references glowing, and his salary requirements modest for someone of his caliber. The application had never reached human eyes. RothTech's applicant tracking system, a sophisticated piece of software designed to streamline the hiring process by automatically screening thousands of applications, had flagged Dr. Walsh's submission for a technical error. His resume, meticulously formatted in a slightly older version of PDF software, contained embedded fonts that the ATS couldn't properly scan. The system had categorized his application as incomplete and automatically moved it to a digital rejection pile that no one ever reviewed. Within 24 hours, an automated email had been sent thanking him for his interest and informing him that his qualifications didn't meet their current needs. Marcus had pulled the hiring records for that position with the grim efficiency of an assistant who knew his boss well enough to anticipate her reaction. The role had ultimately been filled by Dr. Jennifer Morrison, a competent psychologist with 5 years of experience and a degree from a respectable but unremarkable graduate program. Dr. Morrison had been hired not because of superior qualifications, but because her brother-in-law was a RothTech board member who'd mentioned her availability during a casual conversation at a charity golf tournament. She'd been perfectly adequate in the role, but had left after 18 months to move to Portland with her husband, and the position had remained unfilled since her departure. The mathematics of the situation were devastatingly simple. RothTech had rejected the most qualified candidate they'd ever received for a position they desperately needed to fill, then hired someone with a fraction of his experience through nepotism, only to lose that person anyway and leave the role vacant. Meanwhile, the man they'd rejected had been forced to take a janitorial position in their own building, where he'd been providing the exact services they'd needed: professional quality child psychology support for free, to the CEO's own daughter, while emptying their trash cans for minimum wage. Vivienne stared at the documents spread across her desk, each page revealing another layer of institutional failure that she'd overseen as the company's leader. The ATS system she'd approved had been marketed as a revolutionary tool for identifying top talent, but it had systematically eliminated the most qualified candidates while advancing mediocre ones with better connections. How many other Dr. Walshes had they lost to technological discrimination? How many brilliant minds were pushing carts through corporate hallways because algorithm prejudice had deemed their file formats inadequate? But the professional failure paled in comparison to the personal revelation. Her daughter had been struggling with severe anxiety for months, receiving professional quality therapeutic intervention from one of the most qualified child psychologists in the state, and Vivienne hadn't even known it was happening. While she'd been paying Dr. Martinez $300 per session for appointments that Lily dreaded, the man mopping her floors had been providing more effective support through simple human connection and professional expertise, applied with genuine care rather than clinical detachment. The confrontation Vivienne had imagined never materialized. Instead, she found herself standing in the break room on the 38th floor at 11:30 on a Thursday night, watching Ethan Walsh methodically clean coffee makers with the same attention to detail he'd once brought to psychological assessments. He looked up when she entered, showing no surprise at finding the CEO in a space typically reserved for night staff, and offered the same gentle smile he'd given Lily during her panic attack. "Mrs. Roth," he said simply, continuing his work without the nervous deference she'd grown accustomed to from employees. "Is everything all right? Lily's not still in the building, is she?" The question revealed so much about his character. His first concern was for her daughter's welfare, not his own job security or the unusual circumstances of a CEO seeking him out during his shift. Vivienne had prepared a speech, carefully crafted talking points about system failures and missed connections, but faced with his genuine warmth, the corporate language dissolved. "I know who you are," she said instead, the words coming out more like a confession than an accusation. "Dr. Walsh. I know about your application, about the ATS error, about everything we missed. I know that you've been helping Lily, and that you're probably the most qualified person who's ever worked in this building to do exactly what she's needed." Ethan paused in his cleaning, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to something deeper, not anger or resentment, but a kind of weary recognition. "I wondered when you might figure it out," he admitted. "I wasn't trying to hide anything. The name on my uniform is the same one on my degree. But I also wasn't going to demand recognition for doing what felt right." They talked for over an hour in that sterile break room, two parents trying to navigate the gap between their professional competence and their personal failures. Ethan spoke about Sarah's illness and death, about the impossible choice between career and caregiving, about finding purpose in simple work and unexpected connections. Vivienne shared her own struggles with inherited patterns of emotional distance, about the weight of breaking generational cycles while building corporate empires, about the discovery that success could be its own form of failure. "Jack talks about Lily every day," Ethan told her as he finished his rounds. "She's brilliant, you know. Not just academically, emotionally intelligent in ways that most adults never achieve. But she's carrying weight that's too heavy for someone her age. She needs space to just be 7 years old, and she needs to know that she's valuable for who she is, not what she accomplishes." The words hit Vivienne like a physical blow, not because they were harsh, but because they were absolutely true. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted, the confession feeling like stepping off a cliff. "I don't know how to be the kind of mother she needs. I've been trying to give her everything I didn't have, but I think I've been giving her everything except what actually matters." "Then let's figure it out together," Ethan said simply. Not as CEO and janitor, not as doctor and patient, but as two parents who want their kids to be happy. The changes began small, almost imperceptibly, like the first hints of spring after a brutal winter. Vivienne started leaving her office 15 minutes earlier each day, not to rush Lily home to another scheduled activity, but to sit on the marble floor of the lobby and watch Jack teach her daughter origami. She learned to fold paper cranes and lotus flowers, her expensive manicure forgotten as she struggled with creases and angles that seemed to come naturally to 8-year-old fingers. The bubble breaks started as a joke, Ethan bringing his small bottle of soap solution to create a moment of whimsy during particularly stressful weeks. But they evolved into something more significant, sanctioned 15-minute periods when any Roth Tech employee could step away from their desk to engage in something purely joyful and non-productive. The legal department worried about liability, HR questioned the precedent, and several board members raised eyebrows at the frivolity. But productivity actually increased, stress-related sick days decreased, and employee satisfaction surveys showed the highest scores in company history. Ethan accepted the part-time consultant position with characteristic grace, splitting his time between individual counseling sessions with employees' children and developing mental health resources for Rothtech's family wellness program. But he kept his custodial duties as well, a decision that initially puzzled Vivienne until she understood his reasoning. "There's dignity in all honest work," he explained. "And some of my best insights come during the quiet hours when I'm thinking while I clean. Besides, Jack likes having the run of the office after hours. It's become our special time together." The friendship between Jack and Lily deepened into something that resembled siblinghood, protective, competitive, and utterly devoted. Jack taught Lily the coping strategies his father had developed for managing grief and anxiety: breathing exercises disguised as games, mindfulness techniques wrapped in storytelling, and the radical concept that it was okay to feel sad or scared without immediately trying to fix those feelings. Lily, in turn, helped Jack rediscover the joy of learning for its own sake, sharing her genuine fascination with science and literature in ways that had nothing to do with grades or achievement. Vivienne's relationship with her daughter required more patience and intentionality. Years of missed connections couldn't be erased by good intentions, and Lily had learned to protect herself from disappointment by expecting very little from their interactions. But slowly, moment by moment, Vivienne proved that this time was different. She learned to sit quietly while Lily processed difficult emotions instead of immediately jumping to solutions. She discovered that her daughter had inherited her analytical mind, but also possessed an empathy and emotional intelligence that Vivienne herself was still developing. The most profound change was the hardest to quantify: the shift from a household organized around schedule optimization to one built around authentic connection. Dinner became a time for sharing the day's experiences, rather than reviewing tomorrow's agenda. Bedtime stories replaced productivity podcasts. Weekend adventures were chosen based on curiosity rather than educational value. Lily's anxiety didn't disappear. It never would entirely, but it became manageable, a part of her that required attention and care rather than a problem to be solved or hidden. On a spring afternoon 6 months later, Vivienne found herself on the lobby floor again, this time by choice rather than crisis. Lily and Jack were collaborating on an elaborate chalk mural, their heads bent together in serious artistic consultation. The corporate executives still stepped around them, but now some paused to admire the artwork or exchange pleasantries with the children. The culture was shifting, one small interaction at a time. "You know what I realized?" Vivienne said to Ethan as they watched their children create something beautiful together. "I spent so much time trying to build walls to protect Lily from the world that I forgot to build bridges to connect with her." Ethan smiled, his attention split between their conversation and Jack's animated explanation of color theory to Lily. "The great thing about bridges," he replied, "is that they work in both directions, and it's never too late to start building them." The story didn't end with perfect healing or complete transformation. Real life rarely offers such tidy resolutions. Vivienne still struggled to balance the demands of running a major corporation with the needs of being present for her daughter. Lily continued to experience anxiety, particularly during times of change or high stress. Jack still carried the quiet sadness of a child who'd lost his mother too young, and Ethan remained a single father navigating the challenge of rebuilding a career while prioritizing his son's emotional well-being. But they'd learned something invaluable: that healing doesn't require perfection, only presence. That connection matters more than achievement. And that sometimes the most important help comes from the most unexpected places, like a janitor with a bottle of bubble solution, and the wisdom to know that every child deserves to be seen, heard, and valued for exactly who they are. "Manager, he needs to leave right now." The restaurant host's voice cut through the elegant dining room with ice-cold precision. Jack Wilson tightened his grip on his 7-year-old daughter Emma's small hand as she wheezed painfully, her asthma attack growing worse by the second. Judgmental eyes traced over his worn jacket and scuffed shoes. "We don't serve people like him." Tears threatened to spill from Jack's eyes as Emma coughed violently, her tiny body trembling. Just as he picked up their bag to leave, a woman strode through the door, her sharp gaze sweeping across the crowd. "That's my guest," she stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "What would you do if you were in Jack's position? Would you have stood your ground or walked away to protect your child?" Jack Wilson had once believed in the American dream. At 35, he'd expected to be settled in a career, maybe saving for a house with a yard where Emma could play. Instead, he found himself juggling 3 part-time jobs, while raising his daughter alone in a one-bedroom apartment that always seemed to need repairs the landlord ignored. 3 years ago, his wife Linda had walked out, claiming she needed to find herself, a journey that apparently didn't include their 4-year-old daughter or the responsibility of parenting. Before the mass layoffs at Meridian Motors, Jack had been a respected mechanical engineer with benefits and a retirement plan. Now he fixed cars at Wilson's Auto Repair, his grandfather's old garage. On weekends, did maintenance work at an apartment complex on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and tutored high school students in math whenever he could find clients. The irregular hours meant he could be there when Emma got home from school, help with her homework, and most importantly, manage her severe asthma attacks that had been getting worse lately. "Daddy, can I have the blue inhaler?" Emma asked one Tuesday afternoon, her breathing already becoming labored after playing at the park. "Of course, Princess," Jack replied, reaching for her medication bag only to realize with horror that the battery on her nebulizer was dead. His heart raced as Emma's wheezing intensified. They were at least 20 minutes from home, and the replacement battery was there. He frantically tried to jump-start the device, his engineer's mind racing through possibilities while his father's heart pounded with fear. That's when Olivia Morgan walked into their lives. Jack barely noticed the elegant woman in business attire approaching until she was kneeling beside them. "She's having an asthma attack," Olivia stated, rather than asked. "I have a portable nebulizer in my car. May I help?" Jack hesitated, pride warring with desperation. "I can handle it," he started to say, then looked at Emma's frightened eyes and paling lips. "Yes, please. Thank you." Olivia returned moments later with a sleek medical device Jack recognized as cutting edge, the kind that cost more than his monthly rent. While she helped Emma use it, Jack noticed a business card that had fallen from her purse. Olivia Morgan, CEO, Breathe Easy Technologies. "My mother died from complications of severe asthma when I was 15, Olivia explained quietly as Emma's breathing normalized. "That's why I started my company. We develop medical devices for children with respiratory conditions." At 32, Olivia Morgan had accomplished what most people couldn't in multiple lifetimes. As the only daughter of tech mogul William Morgan, she'd graduated from MIT at 20 and transformed her father's investment into Breathe Easy, a medical technology company valued at over $3 billion. Business magazines called her ruthless, brilliant, and ice-cold. None mentioned the nights she spent alone in her penthouse apartment, staring at family photos from before her mother's death, or how the fertility specialists had confirmed that the car accident 5 years ago had left her unable to have children of her own. When a child's drawing fluttered from Emma's backpack, a crayon sketch of a little girl holding hands with a tall man labeled Daddy and a question mark where a mother should be, Olivia felt something crack in her carefully constructed armor. "Thank you," Jack said stiffly as Emma's color returned. "I don't know how to repay you." "There's no need," Olivia replied, her eyes still on Emma's drawing. "I'm just glad I was here." What Jack didn't know then was how those words would change all their lives, forever. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at Jack's apartment containing a state-of-the-art nebulizer and a year's supply of medication. The enclosed card simply read, "From Breathe Easy's Community Outreach Program." Jack almost returned it out of pride, but couldn't deny Emma the care she needed. When the phone rang that same evening with a job offer, Breathe Easy needed a mechanical engineering consultant for a new pediatric device. Jack's suspicions grew. "I don't need charity," he told Olivia bluntly when he confronted her at her office the next day. "It's not charity," she countered. "It's a fair exchange. You have expertise we need, and Emma needs that equipment. Or would you rather your pride take precedence over your daughter's health?" Jack took the consulting job. It paid well enough that he could drop the apartment maintenance work and be home more for Emma. What he hadn't expected was how Olivia Morgan would slowly, carefully, become woven into the fabric of their lives. It started with small things. When Jack mentioned during a meeting that he needed to leave early for Emma's doctor's appointment, Olivia offered to reschedule. Instead, Jack found himself accepting her offer to drive them, since his car was making an ominous rattling sound. At the appointment, Emma clutched Olivia's hand alongside her father's, as the doctor examined her. "Your numbers are improving, Emma," the doctor said, reviewing her charts. "Whatever changes you've made are working." Olivia's smile matched Jack's own proud one, and something shifted between them in that moment. A shared victory. Small, but significant. When Olivia mentioned her father's beloved 1967 Mustang was sitting idle because no mechanic could properly diagnose the engine problem, Jack offered to look at it, a peace offering of sorts. He spent a Saturday at the Morgan estate, Emma playing nearby as he worked. William Morgan, now 80 and slowed by a recent stroke, watched from a garden chair, occasionally offering stories about the car that had been his wife's favorite. "She would have liked you," the older man told Jack when Emma wasn't listening. "Sarah always said you could tell a man's character by how he treats his children." His eyes drifted to where Olivia was showing Emma how to make paper cranes in the garden. "My daughter needs people who see beyond her bank account." By summer, they had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Olivia would join them for dinner once or twice a week, always bringing dessert despite Jack's protests. She helped Emma with her science fair project, a working model of human lungs that won first prize. Jack found himself looking forward to their conversations after Emma went to bed, discussions that ranged from engineering challenges to favorite books to childhood memories. "Daddy," Emma asked one night as he tucked her in, "is Ms. Olivia going to be my new mommy?" The question caught Jack off guard. "She's our friend, sweetie, a very good friend." "But she acts like a mummy," Emma insisted. "She checks my homework and makes my favorite soup when I'm sick, and knows how to braid my hair just right." Jack kissed her forehead. "Sometimes people can care about us without having to be our family." But the lines were blurring. When Emma came down with a high fever during a business trip Olivia had arranged for Jack, it was Olivia who left a board meeting to pick her up from school, Olivia who sat up all night monitoring her temperature, and Olivia whom Emma clung to when the coughing fits came. Jack returned to find them both asleep on the couch, Emma curled against Olivia's side, a children's book open across their laps. He stood in the doorway for several minutes, watching them breathe in unison, afraid to break whatever spell had transformed his lonely little world into something that felt dangerously close to complete. At Christmas, Olivia joined them to decorate their small tree. Emma insisted she stay for their tradition of hot chocolate and reading "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." "You do the voices better than Daddy," Emma declared when Olivia finished the story. Later, after Emma was asleep, Jack handed Olivia a small, wrapped package. "It's nothing fancy," he said, suddenly self-conscious about the gift. A handcrafted wooden music box he'd made in his grandfather's workshop. Olivia opened it to find a tiny mechanical marvel inside. Gears and wheels that, when wound, played "Amazing Grace," her mother's favorite hymn. She looked up at Jack with tears in her eyes. "How did you know?" she whispered. "Your father mentioned it," Jack said softly. "He said she used to sing it to you." Olivia's fingers traced the delicate craftsmanship. "No one has given me something made with their own hands since I was a child." Jack cleared his throat, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. While Emma helped with the painting, their eyes met over the music box, and for one breathless moment Jack thought Olivia might lean closer. Instead, she carefully closed the lid. "Thank you," she said simply. "Both of you." As winter melted into spring, they began to feel like a family. Not in name, but in the hundreds of small ways that matter. Emma started calling Olivia Liv, and saving drawings to show her. Jack found himself texting Olivia about everyday moments, Emma losing her first tooth, a joke a student had told him, a beautiful sunset over the city. Then came the phone call that shattered everything. "Mr. Wilson? This is Margaret from Oakwood Academy. I wanted to personally thank you for the tuition payment. Mrs. Morgan's donation to our scholarship fund specifically for Emma was extraordinarily generous." Jack felt as if the ground had dropped from beneath his feet. "I'm sorry, what donation?" "The full 3-year scholarship," Margaret continued, oblivious to his confusion. "And the medical fund for Emma's treatments. Mrs. Morgan arranged everything last month. She said you'd prefer to keep it confidential, but I wanted to assure you that Emma's place at Oakwood is secure regardless of future circumstances." Jack hung up and stared at his phone in disbelief. Oakwood Academy? the prestigious private school he'd dreamed of sending Emma to but knew he could never afford. A 3-year scholarship would cost tens of thousands of dollars. And a medical fund? He'd never asked for this, never wanted it. When Olivia arrived for dinner that evening, her smile faded as soon as she saw Jack's face. "You had no right," he said quietly, mindful of Emma in the next room. "No right at all." "Jack, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been paying for my daughter's education behind my back? Setting up medical funds like we're some charity case? Was the job just a cover too? A way to give the poor single dad a handout without hurting his pride?" Olivia's face paled. "That's not fair. The job is real. Your work has been invaluable to the project. But the tuition, the medical fund, were you ever going to tell me or just keep pretending you respected me as an equal?" "I do respect you," Olivia insisted, "more than anyone I know. You're brilliant and dedicated, and you love Emma more than anything. I just wanted to help." "I don't need your help." Jack's voice rose despite his efforts to control it. "I've taken care of my daughter on my own for 3 years. We were fine before you came along." "Where you? Was Emma fine using outdated equipment that could fail during an attack? Was she fine missing opportunities because you're too proud to accept help?" Olivia's eyes flashed. "This isn't about you, Jack. It's about Emma." "Don't tell me what's best for my daughter," Jack said, his voice dangerously low. "You're not her mother. You're not family. You're just a rich woman playing house because you can't have children of your own." The moment the words left his mouth, Jack wanted to take them back. Olivia went absolutely still, the color draining from her face. "Olivia, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "You did," she said quietly. "And you're right. I'm not family. I never will be." She turned to leave just as Emma appeared in the doorway, confusion and fear on her small face. "Are you fighting? Is Liv leaving?" "I have to go, sweetheart," Olivia said, her voice breaking slightly as she knelt to Emma's level. "But I want you to remember that She stopped, glancing up at Jack's stony expression. "I'll always be thinking of you." As the door closed behind Olivia, Emma burst into tears. "What did you do, Daddy? Why did you make her go away?" Jack had no answer that wouldn't make things worse. The next blow came 3 days later, when a legal notice arrived. Linda Wilson was filing for full custody of Emma. After 3 years of almost no contact, Jack's ex-wife wanted their daughter back. The paperwork mentioned Linda's recent marriage to real estate developer Richard Mercer and their stable, affluent household, compared to Jack's inadequate living conditions and financial instability. "You can't do this," Jack told his hastily hired attorney, a friend from college who had taken the case at a reduced rate. "She abandoned us." "Technically, she left you, not Emma," his attorney explained gently. "She's claiming she needed time to establish stability before bringing Emma into her new life. And now that she's married to Mercer? So money wins? Is that it?" Jack demanded, panic rising in his throat. "Money buys better lawyers," came the blunt reply. "And they've already filed reports about Emma's medical condition suggesting you can't provide adequate care." Jack thought of Olivia then, the one person who could have helped, whom he'd driven away with his stubborn pride. But even if he could bring himself to call her, what right did he have to ask for anything? Emma grew quieter as the custody battle loomed. She asked about her mother for the first time in years, confused by this sudden interest from a woman who had barely sent birthday cards. The stress triggered more severe asthma attacks, landing her in the hospital twice in 1 month. Jack slept in a chair beside her bed, watching her breathe, terrified of losing the one person who mattered most. The medical bills mounted. Jack took on extra tutoring jobs, sleeping just 4 hours a night. He sold his tools, then his grandfather's watch, and finally considered selling the garage, his last connection to his own father. 2 weeks before the custody hearing, Emma's condition worsened dramatically. The doctors admitted her to intensive care, her little body exhausted from fighting to breathe. Jack sat beside her, holding her hand as she slept fitfully, machines beeping around them. "Mr. Wilson," a nurse appeared at the door. "There's an issue with your insurance coverage. The financial office needs to speak with you. Jack kissed Emma's forehead and followed the nurse down the sterile hallway, dread pooling in his stomach. Without Olivia's support, he'd been unable to maintain the premium insurance coverage Emma needed. The hospital's financial counselor looked sympathetic but firm as she explained the situation. Their basic coverage wouldn't cover the specialized treatment Emma required. "There must be something you can do," Jack pleaded, desperation making his voice crack. "She needs to be here. She can't breathe on her own right now." "I understand, Mr. Wilson, but—" The woman stopped mid-sentence, her eyes focusing on something behind him. "Oh, Mrs. Morgan, I didn't realize you were here." Jack turned slowly to find Olivia standing in the doorway, as elegant as ever in a tailored suit, though her face showed signs of strain. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," Olivia said, her voice cool and professional. "Emma Wilson is covered under the Breathe Easy Foundation's medical support program. All expenses are authorized." The financial counselor blinked in surprise. "I don't see that in our system." "Check again," Olivia said, stepping forward to place a business card on the desk. "And call this number if you need verification. Emma's care is to continue uninterrupted." She turned to leave without looking at Jack, but he caught up to her in the hallway. "Olivia, wait." His voice was raw with emotion. "Why are you doing this?" She finally met his eyes, her expression carefully neutral. "Because Emma deserves the best care, regardless of what happened between us. I can't repay you. I'm not asking you to." She hesitated, then added softly, "How is she?" "Not good," Jack admitted, exhaustion and worry cracking his composure. "The doctors say her lungs are too inflamed. They're trying new treatments, but—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Olivia nodded, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. "I know specialists who might help. I could make some calls, if you want." Jack swallowed his pride completely. "Please. Anything that might help her." Within 24 hours, a pulmonary specialist from Johns Hopkins was consulting on Emma's case. Within 3 days, she was breathing easier on a new treatment protocol. Jack never left her side, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, barely eating. Occasionally he would wake to find fresh coffee beside him, or a proper meal, but Olivia herself kept her distance, speaking only with the medical team. On the 5th day, as Emma's condition stabilized enough for her to stay awake longer, she asked the question Jack had been dreading. "Is Liv mad at us forever now?" "No, princess," he answered, smoothing her hair. "She's actually the one who found the doctors who are helping you get better." Emma's eyes widened. "She is? But I haven't seen her." "That's because—" Jack struggled to find the right words. "Because I hurt her feelings and I don't know how to fix it." "You have to say sorry," Emma said with the simple wisdom of childhood. "And give her a present. That's what you tell me to do when I hurt someone's feelings." Jack smiled despite everything. "When did you get so smart?" Emma shrugged weakly. "Liv says I get it from you." The custody hearing loomed just days after Emma was released from the hospital. Jack's attorney warned him that Linda's legal team was building a strong case, using Emma's hospitalization as evidence that Jack couldn't properly care for her. They had subpoenaed her medical records and school attendance, noting every absence and emergency room visit. On the morning of the hearing, Jack knelt before Emma, now recovered enough to stay with a neighbor during the proceedings. "No matter what happens today," he promised, "I will always be your dad, and I will always love you more than anything in the world." Emma hugged him fiercely. "Don't let them take me away," she whispered. "I'll fight with everything I have," he vowed, his heart breaking at the fear in her voice. The family court was intimidating, all polished wood and solemn faces. Linda sat with Richard and their attorney, a sleek woman in an expensive suit who laid out their case methodically. Jack's financial struggles, the small apartment, Emma's health issues, the superior schools and activities Linda could provide, the stable home environment with Richard. When Jack's attorney presented their defense, it felt painfully inadequate. Character references from neighbors and teachers, Emma's artwork showing her happy life with her father, Jack's perfect attendance at parent-teacher conferences and doctor appointments. While Mr. Wilson's devotion to his daughter is admirable, Linda's attorney concluded, Sentiment cannot replace stability and proper care. Emma deserves the advantages her mother and Mr. Mercer can provide. The judge looked thoughtful. Before I make my decision, I understand there's a late filing witness who has requested to speak. Jack turned in confusion as the courtroom doors opened and Olivia walked in, followed by an elderly man using a cane. William Morgan. Linda's attorney immediately objected. Your Honor, we have no knowledge of this witness. Ms. Morgan has relevant information about the child's welfare, the judge ruled. I'll allow it. Olivia took the stand with calm dignity, introducing herself as the CEO of Breathe Easy Technologies and a close friend of both Jack and Emma Wilson. Mr. Wilson is not just a devoted father, she testified. He's an exceptional one. When Emma was diagnosed with severe asthma, he learned everything about her condition, researched treatments, adapted their home to minimize triggers, and became certified in emergency respiratory care. He works multiple jobs to provide for her while arranging his schedule around her needs. Linda's attorney rose for cross-examination. Mrs. Morgan, isn't it true that you've been financially supporting the Wilsons, paying for medical care, private school tuition, even emergency hospital stays? I established a health foundation that Emma qualifies for, yes, Olivia replied evenly. And why would you do that for a random child? Olivia's composed expression never wavered. Because I lost my mother to respiratory failure when I was 15. Because my company's mission is to prevent other families from experiencing that loss. And because Emma Wilson is an extraordinary child who deserves every opportunity. Isn't it true that you're unable to have children of your own? That you've developed an unhealthy attachment to another woman's child? Jack half rose from his seat, furious, but his attorney pulled him back down. Objection, his lawyer called out. Irrelevant and prejudicial. Sustained, the judge agreed. Counsel, confine your questions to relevant matters. But Olivia answered anyway, her voice steady. My personal medical history is irrelevant to these proceedings. What is relevant is that I've observed Jack Wilson's parenting firsthand for months. I've seen his unwavering commitment to Emma's well-being, often at great personal sacrifice. She turned to face the judge directly. Your Honor, I've established a trust for Emma's education and medical needs that will remain in place regardless of custody arrangements. This removes financial concerns from your decision, allowing you to focus solely on what environment will best support Emma's emotional well-being. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Linda looked stunned, whispering urgently to her attorney. Ms. Morgan? The judge asked. You have no personal stake in this custody decision? My only concern is Emma's welfare, Olivia replied, and having seen the bond between her and her father, I believe separating them would cause profound emotional harm. When Olivia finished, William Morgan requested permission to address the court. Despite objections, the judge allowed it, perhaps out of respect for the elderly man's obvious frailty. I am not here as a billionaire or a businessman, the old man said, his voice soft but clear. I am here as a father who made mistakes. I chose work over family too many times. I missed birthdays and school plays because I thought providing financially was enough. He looked directly at Linda. It wasn't. After my wife died, my daughter needed me present, not just my money. Jack Wilson understands what I learned too late, that time and love are the most valuable gifts we can give our children. As William Morgan returned to his seat, the courtroom remained silent. The judge called a brief recess before announcing his decision. In the hallway, Jack approached Olivia hesitantly. Thank you, he said simply. I don't deserve your help after what I said. Olivia's professional composure cracked slightly. You were right about some things. I overstepped. I should have talked to you about the school and the medical fund. And I was wrong about the important things, Jack admitted. You became family to us, Olivia. To Emma and to me. I was just too proud and scared to admit it. Before she could respond, they were called back into the courtroom. The judge's decision was clear. Primary physical custody would remain with Jack, with Linda granted visitation rights and input on major decisions. As the judge detailed the arrangement, Jack noticed Linda watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. After the hearing concluded, Linda approached them alone. Your friend is very persuasive, she said to Jack, nodding toward Olivia, who was helping her father to a bench nearby. She believes in telling the truth, Jack replied carefully. Linda's eyes drifted to where Emma waited with the neighbor in the corridor. I thought I was doing the right thing, she said quietly. I wasn't ready to be a mother then. I thought I was. Now, with Richard and the new house. She trailed off, then added, but watching you all today, I realized Emma already has what she needs. She needs her mother too, Jack said, surprising himself with the words, just not at the expense of her stability. Linda nodded slowly. I'd like to be part of her life again, the right way this time. If you'll let me. We can work something out, Jack agreed, for Emma's sake. 3 months passed. Spring brought new beginnings in more ways than one. Jack accepted a full-time position with Breathe Easy, designing next-generation pediatric respiratory devices. Emma's health improved dramatically with a new treatment protocol, allowing her to join the soccer team she'd always watched wistfully from the sidelines. They moved to a bright 2-bedroom apartment closer to her school, with a small balcony where Emma insisted on planting tomatoes and sunflowers. Linda kept her word, starting with short visits and gradually building a healthier relationship with her daughter. Richard, surprisingly, turned out to be genuinely fond of Emma, often bringing science kits that fed her growing interest in medicine. Olivia remained present in their lives, though different than before. The easy intimacy had been replaced by something more careful, more measured. She still joined them for Sunday dinners and helped with Emma's science projects. She still lit up when Emma rushed to hug her, still engaged in lengthy debates with Jack about engineering principles or books they'd both read. But something unspoken hung between them, possibilities neither dared to voice. For Emma's 8th birthday in May, they planned a small party in the community garden behind their new building. Jack spent hours decorating the space with fairy lights and colorful streamers, while Emma proudly introduced her school friends to my dad and my Liz. As twilight fell and the other families departed, the 3 of them remained, clearing away cake plates and balloon strings. Emma carried her new telescope, a gift from Olivia, to the far corner of the garden to examine the emerging stars. She's happy, Olivia observed, watching Emma call out constellation names she'd memorized. Happier than I've seen her in years, Jack agreed. She's thriving at school, her breathing tests are better than they've ever been, and she's making friends. He paused, then added quietly, "Thank you isn't enough for everything you've done." Olivia shook her head. "You did the hard part. You're the one who never gave up on her." "I almost lost her anyway," Jack admitted. "If you hadn't stepped in at the hospital, if you hadn't testified—" "But I did," Olivia said simply. "Some things are worth fighting for." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Emma, who was now carefully recording observations in the star journal that had accompanied the telescope. "My father asked about you yesterday," Olivia said after a while. "He wants to know when you're coming for dinner again. He says the Mustang isn't running right, but I think he just misses your conversations." Jack smiled. "Tell him I'll come by this weekend." He hesitated, then added, "Emma misses your place too. The koi pond, the kitchen with the big island where you taught her to make cookies." Olivia's expression softened. "She's welcome anytime. You both are." Emma bounced back to them, excitement making her words tumble over each other. "I saw Jupiter. It has little dots around it that are moons. Can we go somewhere darker to see better, like the mountain house Liv told me about?" Jack raised an eyebrow at Olivia. "Mountain house? My family has a cabin upstate," Olivia explained. "I mentioned it once when Emma was asking about stars. It's on a lake, very little light pollution, perfect for astronomy." "Can we go, please?" Emma begged, looking between them, like a family trip. The word family hung in the air between the adults. Jack cleared his throat. "That would be up to Olivia, honey." "I'd love that," Olivia said softly, her eyes meeting Jack's. "The cabin has plenty of room. We could go next weekend, if you're free." Later, after Emma had fallen asleep clutching her new astronomy book, Jack found himself alone with Olivia on the small balcony. The city lights sparkled below them, a man-made reflection of the stars above. "I'm sorry," he said finally, the words he'd needed to say for months. for pushing you away, for what I said about Jack, you don't have to. I do, he insisted gently. You became the most important person in our lives, and when I felt threatened, I lashed out at the thing I thought would hurt you most. It was unforgivable. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. I understand fear, she said finally. After my mother died, I built walls around myself. Success, money, achievements. They were safer than letting people close enough to lose them. She looked out at the cityscape. Then I met you and Emma, and suddenly those walls seemed pointless. Jack reached across the space between them, his hand finding hers. Emma asked me last week if you were going to be her new mom, he said softly. I told her relationships are complicated, that I didn't know what the future held. What did she say to that? Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She said sometimes the best families are the ones we build ourselves. Jack smiled. She's too smart for her own good. Olivia's fingers tightened around his. She gets that from her father. They sat in companionable silence, neither rushing to define what was growing between them. There would be time for that, for conversations about boundaries and expectations, for learning how three separate lives might weave together into something stronger. For now, it was enough to sit side by side under the stars, holding hands like teenagers, full of possibility and second chances. Whatever shape their future took, the foundation was already there, built on something more enduring than the initial attraction or shared circumstances that had brought them together. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow from broken places. Sometimes family isn't what you're born into, but what you create with love and courage and the willingness to try again after loss. For Jack, Emma, and Olivia, the road ahead wasn't certain, but they would walk it together, step by step, day by day, building a home not made of walls, but of hearts that had found each other when they needed it most. If this healing journey touched your heart, please like this video, share this story, and subscribe to our channel to restore your faith in humanity and family bonds. What ending would you write for Jack, Emma, and Olivia? Do you believe they'll become the family Emma dreams of having?